Hey, deserving listeners, Love Is Blind. Let's check it out.
5 taquitos deep and just absolutely...
5? Those things were...
I was smacking them. I was eating them so fast and so hard, I bit the shit out of my lip. Yeah. You gotta be easy on the kisses, because...
That's funny. I can relate to that. You know, there are times when you're hungry and there's taquitos and salsa and guac and stuff, and you just want to go to town on the buffet and no one else is really doing it. So he's saying that, and then he bit his lip. Yeah, it happens, right? Like I'll maybe once a year I'll bite the inside of my cheek or something, and it usually happens when I'm eating something that I really like. I'll be like, oh man, and then you bite and it's like you're in pain, but you like what you're eating. So, and plus your mouth is full of food, so you're just like powering through the pain, and and the next bite is like, I really like this what I'm eating, but oh, this hurts so bad.
That's your least favorite of the whole trip?
Yeah, I was like walking back after we left the beach, like spitting blood.
It was that bad?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whoa. Spitting blood. Drawing a little bit of blood, I think, is unfortunately not uncommon for me anyway, but spitting blood, like, wow. Must have really hit something.
That was your least favorite, not arguing?
No, the argument was good for us.
That's true. That's very true.
But you know what my favorite part was?
That's really great. For him, as I don't know if he's avoidant attached. He could be actually more secure than avoidant. He looked avoidant in the pods. With Chelsea, he looks less avoidant, honestly. So there's that. But anyway, regardless of where he is on the attachment spectrum, he's saying, seemingly believable. I mean, he could just be saying that, but it sounded genuine that he says that the fight was good. And that says something, if he believes it to be true. If he were truly avoidant, or even moderately avoidant, or problematic in some way, then he wouldn't have that narrative, right? He'd be like, yeah, there was that fight. Let's never do that again. What he's saying is, it was good. It was good to have that. I don't know what he saw that was good about it. Clarified some things, got things off people's chests, gave them an opportunity to bond through making up. And, that's the thing. I don't recommend manufacturing conflict so that you can get to the makeup phase. I've anecdotally heard of some couples doing that, and they would report that that works for them. Like in the old days in couple therapy circles, us clinicians would privilege couples that are very therapist-y as they work out their conflict, where they a lot of I statements, a lot of listening, real positive communication, managing your emotions well, expressing your emotions well. And when we actually looked at actual couples, John Gottman and others have done a lot of research on that, observing couples and then tracking them over time, observing how couples manage conflict, asking them questions about how they manage conflict, and then tracking them over time to see if they stay together and if their marital satisfaction continues to be positive. What they find is that there are 3 different types of couples that can succeed in being satisfied and stay together. One is the therapist-y couple, where one or both are very quintessentially healthy in their communication. The second one are couples that will maybe not purposely fight, but they fight a lot. The difference is that they also have a lot of positive interactions. What John Gottman and colleagues here at University of Washington in Seattle discovered by observing couples is that there needs to be a ratio of positive to negative of 5-1. Well, what does that mean? Well, what that literally means is they would have couples in a bungalow in Seattle, and they would live there 24/7, and there's all these cameras, and the couples know this, and the couples just live their lives and interact with each other or don't interact with each other. And the researchers would code as many interactions as possible as either positive, neutral, or negative. And a positive interaction, you think positive interaction, or you think like date night or kissing each other. And those would be positive interactions. But sometimes a positive interaction was like one, I always remember this because I watched some of the clips from this research, that the husband was reading the newspaper, I think, and having coffee in the morning. The wife, she's sipping her coffee and she looking out the window, and she says, "Oh, there's a bird," or something. I think bird. And he's really in his newspaper. It's been quiet, right? It's a very quiet morning. She goes to the window, "Oh, bird," and he's like, "Oh yeah," and then back to his newspaper. That's a positive interaction, because long-term relationships, marriages, when they start to get long in the tooth, positive interactions can be essentially that, right? There's just little interactions where there's a connection, because when she could have looked at the bird and just thought to herself, "Oh, bird," but she says it to, not directly to him, but the idea is that he can hear her, and he hears it, and it's not a direct thing like, "Hey, look at this bird," or "Hey, I want to interact with you just for a second." It's "Hey, look at this bird," and he could have not looked. He could have, "I don't want to look at a bird. I'm reading my newspaper." He could have been tuning her out. He hears it, and he's like, "Huh? Oh yeah, oh, interesting." Goes, and if you've ever had moments like that where you will say something in the presence of your partner, like, "Hey, look at the," or even just, "Hey, wow, that bird's really pretty," and your partner can hear you and they just don't respond, depending, it can feel like a rejection, right? And when you're in love and you care about each other, you're just naturally interested, and it feels bad to just ignore them, right? So it's a sign of a lot of things that are working well. But anyway, so you need 5 to 1. And of course, the big ones like laughing together or having sex with each other when it's going well are also positive interactions. So ideally, you need 5 positive to 1 negative. And so if you're having a lot of negative interactions by fighting, and the fights were not necessarily, they weren't therapist-y. They were sometimes mean to each other or hostile, upsetting, right? Watching it, whoa, they're not doing so well. The idea is for those couples, and of course doing that can destroy a relationship, but for these couples that over time through research were found to actually be doing well, they would have a lot of negative interactions, but they had a lot more positive ones. So they just interacted a lot more than the typical couple. And when you actually coded all of the interactions, there were 5 positive to every 1 negative. So it's not that you have negative interactions, it's that you counteract them with a lot of positive. The third couple that would succeed is a subdued couple where there isn't much interacting at all. Looking at them, they would appear to not be in love. There's lack of a connection. There's not a lot of interacting. But it's the style of relationship that they prefer. Maybe it's introversion, maybe it's being more avoidant or leaning, or they're just generally quiet people or something, or they have other relationships in their life. But again, although you didn't see very many negative interactions, they also didn't have very many positive. So they need to make sure that, say they have only 12 interactions in a week as opposed to 120 for another couple. Well, if they only have 12 interactions in a week, then it's really important that 10 of those interactions be positive. Again, even if it's just like bird. So that's what that research shows. And it's important to know this for me, and I learned this when I was initially being trained, because what therapists can do is they can impose that therapist-y style of being a couple on all the couples and view them all as being problematic, whereas it's more helpful for therapists, because therapists are more likely to be like therapists in conversations, we, not always, but we typically are. And so it's my job to figure out which type of couple that I'm treating so that I can help them capitalize on their style, right? If I see a lot of fighting, it could be a concern, but it also could mean that they just lack a lot of positive interactions, right? So instead of taking away the conflict, we could just add positive things that can just counteract the negative. I'm speaking simplistically about this. It's a lot more complicated than just having positive interactions. You know, if you have a lot of negative interactions that are pretty destructive, there's not a lot you can do to counteract that, but it depends on the sort of negative interaction. But anyway, so the reason why I brought this up is because they actually seem like one of those couples, that second category. You know, who knows what they'll be like ongoing, but, you know, I could imagine that could play out because they do have a lot of positive interactions. You know, when he apologized, all that eye contact and, you know, holding and kissing and apologizing and giving each other the benefit of the doubt, a lot of smiling, a lot of complimenting each other. For us as viewers, or for me anyway, watching that scene, I could over-bias that fight without recognizing how it's being balanced out.
Really happy.
Yeah.
What are you nervous about going back to Charlotte?
Yeah, I don't think we'll have any issues.
Do you have zero concerns, like, at all?
After technically living with you for a while.
So I just want to point out that this is very indicative of at least her being preoccupied, anxious attachment. I don't know about him. I think it's tempting to speculate that he has avoidant attachment, which, as I've said before, there are some signs, but it's hard to know. And he actually has a fair amount of signs of secure attachment, like that he was able to handle the fight overall. If you just look at the overall interaction that they had, that he managed his emotions overall well. He managed to hold on to compassion and empathy and care. He apologized and seemed sincere. And so that kind of trust, you know, when securely attached people, when they're in a situation like that with someone that they love, someone that they're attached to, there is a threat. That's one of the ways of looking at attachment styles. You know, there's a reason why we call them styles. It's not something that is set in stone. It's a pattern. And often it is patterned and does perpetuate itself over time, but it's not something that is permanent, right? It's a style that's developed when children are young. And what the style is the style of reacting to attachment threat, meaning that when you're 2 years old and your parent isn't there, you know, maybe your parent is at work, or meaning your caregivers, your primary attachment figure, or they're on the phone and you want their attention, or they're paying attention to your sibling and not to you, and you want them to pay attention in that moment, or you're at the grocery store and you see a stranger that scares you and you're 4 years old and you run to your caregiver, your attachment figure. How does your attachment figure respond to you? It's just all those attachment behaviors. And when there's threat, either of rejection or distance, when you want, you know, the whole idea with attachment, and if you have children, you'll see this, that when they're very young, they want to be with you all the time, right? And then when they're 25, they want to be with you some of the time, but not most of the time. So life and development is just a progression to that point. And so how that is facilitated is that the child, and this is all observed in the lab, and other primates do this as well, that the infant will, once they feel safe enough with their caregiver and secure, they have a secure base. This is what John Bowlby, this is his language, that once they have a secure base, their primary caregiver is like, okay, you got me, you see me, you know me, I can trust you, you're safe. And you're generally always there for me. And you pay attention to me and you love me. Not all the time, but generally you do that. And so now that I have this secure base, like a home base, I can start to venture out, because that's what people want to do. That's what humans like to do. They like to adventure, explore, find themselves, discover things, interact with other people, succeed, have adventures. So the child, even at the age of 2, will, once they're secure, will, even in the moment, will venture away. They run into a threat, stranger or something scary, or it's just been too long since they've been with their caregiver. They come back and then they rebond. They come back to home base and then they go out. And this action is how secure attachment is established. It's not this action. That's not how secure attachment is established. It's this action. The secure base is generally there, and the human being is moving back and forth. Okay, and that continues for the rest of that child's life. You could be 70 years old and have a 95-year-old mother, and you're still doing that at the age of 70. And of course, the parent is also getting emotional gratification, but generally speaking, this is how it's working. And so through that, as long as there's enough trust and enough stability, enough dependability, enough attunement, that's a key ingredient in attachment as well, that the caregiver is attuned, meaning that they notice enough of the time and respond well enough of the time to the emotional content that the child is presenting. So attunement means noticing and responding. You can respond well, but if you don't notice, then you're not going to be able to respond well because you don't even notice. If you just notice and don't respond well, that doesn't do any good to the child. The child needs you to notice and respond well. And that could be as small as seeing a kid enjoy themselves playing Lego, and you say, "Oh, you really like playing Lego," or "Oh, that's a creative thing that you're making. That's pretty cool." Yeah, that's it. And the kid's like, "Oh," they notice, they can see my actions. Or another, maybe more specific, would be like, "Oh, you seem to really be enjoying playing with Lego. You're really into that. That's really cool." Okay, so you're mentalizing as a caregiver about what's going on in their mental state, and you're imagining it. There's signs, or you're empathizing and you're intuiting, but because you know your kid well enough and their facial expressions that they're really into that. And so you're putting words to emotions, you're noticing, you're seeing their inner world, and the child is like, without even knowing necessarily that they wanted that, it is fulfilling in that way. And of course, all the trials and tribulations that the child goes through, if you're noticing enough of the time and you are responding well enough of the time, not all the time, it's not possible, but then secure attachment is facilitated. Good working models of others, good working model of self is facilitated. So for the secure individual, when they are older, they have a trust that because with the caregiver, there would be bad times, conflict, disappointment, rejection. And in those moments, as the child's interacting with the primary caregiver, over time, what is proven to that child is, well, I know right now we're having a bad moment, but we've had them before. And this isn't super conscious. This is a lot of neurological wiring that is happening, automatic responses and associations that the child is developing. But some of it can be a little conscious too. But anyway, the child in the middle of rejection, say the parent is particularly stressed out and is just not responding well to the child, not noticing, or being a little short with the child, like pick up your toys, whatever. That can happen. And so the child in that moment will feel hurt or scared or something. And if the past has proven to them that there will be moments like that, but it's not forever, and love and connection and safety is just around the corner for that child, they will regulate much easier, right? It's a much easier situation to deal with. It's like, this is not great, but it's not the rule. It's the exception to the rule. I just have to wait or distract myself, and things will return to normal, which is secure attachment. So when you're in a fight, so this is where I'm getting to, is when you have secure attachment style, meaning that there's a fight, say you're having a fight with your partner and there's rejection on the line, judgment on the line, scary things on the line, like, are they going to leave me? Are they going to cheat on me? Are we not really in love? What's happening right now? The ability to regulate through that situation neurologically to know that, in your bones, it's not something that you have to convince yourself of. It's sort of like, I trust that the sun will rise tomorrow. I won't see it because I live in Seattle and we always have clouds, but I trust that behind those overcast clouds is a sun. Because why? It's literally happened every single day of my entire life. I don't have to read it in a book. I experience that repetitive experience. And so for people that have had that history, particularly when they're very young, first few years of life, and the neurology is getting locked in, then when they're in a fight, so Jimmy is in this fight, and overall he stayed present. He didn't go on the attack. Really, he was defensive a little bit, but that could be expected. He recovered pretty quickly. She moves off. He pursues, apologizes, managed that really well. She also took to it really well. And that trust, that belief, also the belief that you're a good person. If you're not treated well, sometimes your working model of self will be very negative. I don't deserve love. I'm not worthy. And you can sort of convince yourself that you're worthy, or you have a little bit of self-worth to get you through the beginning of a relationship. Then you have a bad moment. Jimmy could have, in that moment, said, here we go. Once again, I'm realizing and seeing evidence that I don't matter. I don't deserve love. He doesn't give the style of someone that would have that working model self, but we don't know. At the very least, we could argue that that's what Chelsea went through, that she experienced some things that threatened that. He was commenting on another woman and seemingly flirting with this other woman. At least that's, I think, how Chelsea was interpreting it. And the way that Chelsea reacted, it's possible that her working model of self is, I don't deserve love. No one's going to love me. And here it's happening again. And I'm terribly afraid, and I'm terribly hurt, and I'm alone, and I'm upset and angry, and why is this happening again? Whereas if she were more secure, then she would see that and go, well, it kind of looks like this, but maybe it's not that bad. And even if it is that, and this is kind of key, even if he is flirting, even if he does want to be with AD, or he doesn't appreciate me, or isn't attracted to me, doesn't love me, that would suck. But I know I'm a good person. I know I'm a level, and this is a lot of subconscious beliefs, but I know I'm good enough, and it'll suck. I don't want to be rejected because I want to be with him, but I'm okay. Someone else will love me. I have people who love me outside of him, and that can help, right? To have that peace of mind, right? That's what a lot of the panic of the preoccupation is fueled by. It's not just that my partner is giving me things to be paranoid about. This is the beginning of the end for me. No, I finally got one person to love me, and if they don't love me, no one will. I'll be alone for the rest of my life. So it becomes a panic, right, for some people, because they were treated in a way that they developed a working model of self that is unlovable, not worthy. This is all attachment theory language, by the way. John Bowlby and others developed all this stuff. And I'm just repeating that work and that research and that literature. It's very complicated, but it's also very elegant and simple and all that. Anyway, so I was saying about style is that some people are like, okay, which one am I? Am I secure? Am I preoccupied? Am I avoidant, dismissive? Am I fearful, disorganized? Which one am I? Well, and I guess we talk about this in a certain way, but it's not really linguistically true that, the style of your dress, the way, the style of your clothes, right? You have a style, you have a particular avenue that you tend to stay within regarding your clothing. Now, maybe you have a mainstream style in your culture, but it's still a style. And you wouldn't say that you are the style of clothing that you wear, right? People will sometimes speak that way, but it's, everyone understands that if you wanted to, you could literally wake up the next day, throw away your entire wardrobe and adopt a completely new style of clothing. And it doesn't really change who you are. It can be hard, you have a preference for that style, But if you got used to it, or you're in a different culture, or you had a change in your body or something, you can change the style. Well, that's what attachment style is. It's a style, it's a pattern, it's a habit, it's a automatic reactivity that is not super conscious. So when we're young, there are attachment threats of rejection or of being harmed, and we develop at the age of 18 months to 3 to 4 years a style of dealing with attachment threat and dealing with rejection possibilities, dealing with the longing or the need of closeness and connection, dealing with the need to adventure. There's a style. Preoccupied people, because of the inconsistency that's happening for them, their style is to be clingy and to have bigger emotions, not consciously, but to feel emotions bigger, to be preoccupied and hypervigilant about what's going on with you and being oriented towards the other person and towards the relationship, because they're trying to game the system because they need to in order to get a little bit more attachment security. They don't get all that they need, but they're getting a little bit more through the hypervigilance, through the exaggerated feelings, because that will draw attention to them, even if it's negative. For the avoidant person, their style that they develop at the age of 2 is to turn away and to deaden and numb their feelings, to ignore their feelings, ignore their body sensations, to stop encoding memories effectively, because it's easier to forget if you don't even encode the memories to begin with. You have short-term memory of the event, but especially if it's negative, as soon as it's over, don't let it go to long-term memory. This is studied neurologically. Generally speaking, they have a hard time remembering anything in their past. You ask avoidant people about their childhood, and they'll be like, yeah, everything's fine. You investigate it, and they start remembering, especially when they talk to their siblings. So, oh yeah, I guess there was that, and there was that negative thing. Because it was just easier, because they learned it's better to turn away and turn off, depend on the self, and maybe even through anger. It's just like, screw you, I don't need it. But this is an 18-month-old child, and that's how they don't even verbalize it, right, even in their own mind, because they don't speak yet in full sentences anyway. And so they're emotionally just like, screw that, and I can depend on myself, and I don't need anybody, and I'm better than other people, that kind of thing. And so for disorganized people, it's a whole other thing that I won't go into right now. It's not a combination of the two. It's a completely other thing, and I've talked about it before. Anyway, for secure people, it's different, like I was saying before. Anyway, so people can be a combination of these styles, because in the same way that you can have a combination of fashion styles, right? You could wear Vans checkered shoes and a fancy dress. Like for myself, I, having thought about it a lot and also taking a lot of tests, would characterize myself as having a mostly secure attachment style with when I'm pushed into a corner and I am threatened or feel threatened, I have a tendency to be mild to moderate avoidant, but I can also be preoccupied at times. I don't know what percentage. I think I would say, and I've been through a lot of therapy, and I work a lot myself. I work in my relationship with Stacy. My relationship with Stacy is very positive and non-conflictual and supportive and fun. So that experience will make me not have the avoidant and the preoccupied reactivity, because there's not a threat to react to. But if things started to get bad, then I would start to become more avoidant, right? Anyway, so for myself in terms of percentage, I think I put myself at like 60, 70% secure. And I wasn't always this way. When I was younger, I would have put that much lower. And I think I've put myself at like, 20% avoidant and 5% preoccupied. I don't think that adds up to 100, so 75%. So maybe like 25% avoidant. Anyway, so that's what attachment theory is in a nutshell. And so for him to be able to say and to deal with the conflict well enough, and for her too, she was starting to look like, this looks like moderate to severe preoccupation, But when I look at the whole of the matter, and especially the recovery, it looks more mild. But he might be particularly helpful. The way that she says, he handles me well. And maybe in a different sort of relationship, different sort of guy, she would be exhibiting a lot more severe preoccupation. So also in this moment, she asks what your favorite moment is, and it is sort of an avoidant thing to honestly answer, oh, when we were on those four-wheelers, that was my favorite moment. Not because that is his most significant moment, but because the way that he remembers and the way that he feels, the way that he notices his emotions. Avoidant people, they don't consciously ignore their emotions. When they were 2, 3, 4 years old, neurologically, they have been, to some extent, cut off, not only from their emotions, but sometimes just from their body from the neck down, because that's where our emotions are signaled to us, our gut, our chest, our shoulders, blah, blah, blah. So for him, even though he had very significant, intense moments that if he felt his emotions, he would not say the four-wheeler, he would say moments with you, because you would just imagine that would be the most novel of the experiences if Jimmy is legitimately in the relationship, which I'm just assuming that he is until proven otherwise. So that's a way of conceptualizing that. We also notice Chelsea, I'll rewind it, that she's very focused on what's in his mind. She's the one asking the question. She's the one that will offer up moments of the two of them as being her favorite moment, because that's what she's paying attention to. If she is preoccupied, you're hypervigilant, you're locked in, especially in an insecure, unsure new scenario like this. Maybe a year from now, Chelsea can feel a lot more relaxed if they survive and if they are, have a good enough secure relationship. She might exhibit far less preoccupation in the future. I don't know if she's preoccupied, but I just thought I would point that out. I guess I would say every season I'm going to yammer about that once, and there you go.
Well, you know what my favorite part was?
What?
The first time I got to whip you around in a vehicle.
Wow, that's romantic.
So another data point is he's saying that, and then she's like, wow. And she's not over the top, but she's exhibiting a little displeasure with his answer. Sarcastic of, wow, that's romantic. It's not over the top, right? But it's communicative. And it either goes over his head or it doesn't really register for him, because he's, the one of the problematic, and it helped when they were young for the avoidant person to be in their own world, to just shut out other people because it doesn't help them to pay attention. So they neurologically are very focused on themselves. Narcissism can emerge, narcissistic personality can emerge from severe avoidant styles. So you will focus on how things are for you. And so for him, and you could even argue that what he's saying is a little narcissistic, not in the personality sort of sense, but in terms of, I liked it when I was whipping you around in the... Now, maybe what he's saying is, I really liked how much love I felt and fun I felt between the two of us. But he doesn't emphasize that. He's emphasizing the machine that he was operating. And then when she says, wow, that's romantic, it doesn't derail him. He just is like, huh? So either he's just like, well, I'm not going to address that right now, or it isn't even really getting in. And this, this could be very frustrating. If you're a preoccupied person, you would look at an avoidant person and be like, well, obviously you're shutting me out. Obviously you're rejecting me. Obviously you don't care. And I've worked with many couples in this configuration. It could be that, but it also could be that the avoidant person, given the way that they had to cope with their attachment figures growing up, they literally just don't even notice or register. And a lot of the healing has to do with them feeling their feelings, so that when other people have feelings, they know what that feels like and can respond in a helpful way, right? You can have the capacity for empathy. You can have the capacity for compassion, but unless you really know or have an idea of what someone else is going through, it won't provoke any compassion.
Buggies was so freaking fun. Riding to the beach, riding through the jungle with you.
You want to know what my favorite part was?
What's your favorite part?
This morning.
So a sign that her attachment is, at least in this relationship, and perhaps, generally speaking across relationships, is at least a little bit secure. Maybe she has, 5 toes in the secure camp. If she were more preoccupied, she would have decompensated in this moment because of what he said. And we've seen that on the show. There will be people that, under the mildest of attachment threats, will just nosedive and just downward spiral. And she didn't do that. She said something, a little shot across the bow, a little sarcasm, but then she's like, it was, even the fact that she can even go there in her heart and her memory and identify that closeness indicates that she either isn't that triggered and or she has a more secure base to operate from.
When you woke up and you were so sweet.
I'm sweet every morning.
But you were extra sweet. It made me really happy.
Yeah.
And for her to be vulnerable, to take that risk. It is a huge risk, apparently, because it's so hard for us humans to do this. It doesn't make a lot of sense on paper. If you love someone and, if you trust someone, even long-term relationships, it can be hard. There's a resistance to saying romantic, nice things. I really, really appreciated today, or I felt a lot of love from you today. It's extending yourself. It's an opportunity for, it's a test. Like, I'm throwing this out there. Are you going to laugh at me? Are you going to reject me? It's easier just to not. And then I won't have to know if they love me or hate me, because that's more palatable to me, especially if you believe that everyone hates you or that relationships always are terrible. It can be easier to not take that risk. You're thinking, well, I don't want to know the answer. It's sort of like, you don't want to take some sort of test like an HIV test, because you're just like, well, I don't want to know, because what if it's positive? Well, it's like, well, you either have it or you don't. It's not like Schrodinger's cat. It's like, it's one or the other. and taking the test doesn't change. Taking the test and having it come up positive doesn't mean you suddenly got HIV, right? So it can be scary, right? And I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's the same in a relationship. It's like, it's better if you're thinking that, one, there's a good possibility that he hates me and doesn't really love me, or even if it's a small chance of that happening, if I'm devastated by that possibility because I don't believe in myself or I don't have a support system, then it's just better not to take that risk. The problem is when we don't take that risk, then the other person will feel that distance and the relationship will actually break up.
What are you nervous about going back to Charlotte?
Yeah, I don't think we'll have any issues.
Do you have zero concerns, like, at all?
So this is the original little bit that I was going on that whole thing about. I'll just briefly say that she's the one asking the questions, which is fine, but we can't really imagine him asking these sorts of questions, right? Pattern in the edit anyway is, she's the one that is inquiring, and it doesn't mean that he isn't concerned with it. If he is avoidant, a lot of avoidant people are very concerned with these things, just as much as preoccupied people, but they're not aware of it, or even if they are, they're just not, they don't want to extend themselves. They have a policy of pathological independence, so sometimes they actually appreciate it when the preoccupied person brings it up. So she's the one asking the questions. She's the one that is more worried, and it's not the other direction, which is, potentially an indication of, at least a little bit of a bifurcation between a little bit of preoccupation, a little bit of, it's possible that she's mildly preoccupied, he's mildly avoidant, or they're both secure, and like I was saying for myself, I'm mostly secure because of my childhood and also the amount of work I've done. Particularly learning attachment theory actually really helped. If you've heard my deep dive on attachment theory, I think I talk about it, but I'll tell you now that learning attachment theory thoroughly, because it's a very complicated theory, and learning all the research and learning the biology and perhaps the evolutionary factors we can't know about our evolution and about our psychology regarding evolution. We can't devise studies to test that. It'd be inhumane to do that to humans and to primates for that matter. And we don't have a time machine to observe how we evolved over time. But it stands to reason that we evolved instincts of attachment, because you just look at behavior and it does facilitate survivability and blah, blah. Anyway, so when I learned about attachment theory and really learned it and really drilled it into my head, it was like Neo in the Matrix. I just started seeing attachment for myself and others and my relationships. I just started seeing everything through that lens. And I was like, whoa, it's everywhere. It's not just me and Stacy. It's everyone that I work with. It's between nations. It's between me and myself. Of course, me and my parents and my siblings, and particularly, children. And it's happening all the time. It's just a constant thing that's happening. It's not just when you're having a fight or a lovey moment. It's happening all the time. And there's so many behaviors that are explained through this theory. And for myself to understand why, because our attachment style will feel like it's healthy. It'll feel like it's natural. Well, of course, I'm asking him a lot of questions. Of course, I reacted in the way that I did, because that's the way you've been literally since you were 2 years old. Once you know it, you're like, oh, and this is how attachment styles mesh together, and these patterns that develop, and these triggers, and I really started to understand my needs. It's like, oh, I have needs of attachment all the time, and it's interesting the way that I go about meeting those needs, and it's interesting the way I go about reacting to attachment threat. And it all, it's all starting to make sense now. It really is mind-blowing. So I invite you to listen to that deep dive and or study it yourself. You can read the general self-helpy kind of books that are, in my experience, anecdotally, generally pretty good. But if you really want to know it, you want to read John Bowlby himself. He wrote 3 books that are his seminal works: Attachment, Loss, and Separation. And so each book is a one-word title from my memory: Attachment, Loss, and Separation. And I don't remember which order. I think it might be Attachment, Separation, and Loss. Anyway, those books are not made for the layperson. I would say a lot of clinicians, even myself, it's very dense. There's a lot of research. But if you take your time with it and maybe supplement it with more easily understandable information, like my deep dive, for example, or other podcasts I've talked about, or even literally just what I've been talking about this episode, I think it really, it's like I said, it's like seeing the Matrix. All right, well, let's adjourn there. I want to remind everyone to please take care of yourself and others, because we all deserve it. We really, really do.